When the U.S. Constitution was written in 1787, most people thought that women voting just wasn't natural.
Men were public, women were private. They were in the sphere of the home and family. So to see women not only fighting for a very public right, but fighting publicly for it and even speaking in public was very novel.
Nevertheless, a grassroots movement for women's suffrage spread across the country. By the beginning of the 20th century, activists had convinced lawmakers in 4 states to fully enfranchise women.
In 1913, the struggle for a woman's right to vote took a dramatic turn. A woman named Alice Paul, who was only 28 at the time, decided to take on the President of the United States. She wanted him to rally for women's suffrage.
The problem was that President Woodrow Wilson didn't really support women voting. But his party did control the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. If Wilson wanted to, he could get Congress to propose a constitutional amendment guaranteeing women's right to vote. So Alice Paul began to get his attention.
She decided that she would have a parade the day before Woodrow Wilson arrives for his inauguration. So somehow she is able, almost single-handedly, to get 13,000 women to come to Washington. Women are immediately assailed. Paul, of course, is thrilled. This is what you want. You want to see the state reacting and overreacting. It helps your cause.
But President Wilson just didn't change his mind all that much. Then, 4 years later, Wilson got reelected. So Alice Paul and her group, the National Women's Party, decided to do something that no one had ever done before.
The National Women's Party was the first organization to ever picket the White House, and they really targeted President Wilson. They held up banners and signs directly focused at him. So a lot of them began, "Mr. President."
After 9 months of this, police began arresting the picketers for blocking traffic. More than 200 women were sent to jail. There, they were beaten and fed rotten food. Some women protested their conditions and went on a hunger strike. So what did the jailers do? Put tubes down their noses and force them to eat.
And it started to change public perception. People didn't see them as sort of these crazy ladies out on the picket line agitating for something that wasn't right. But instead, people started to see them as women who were willing to die for their cause.
One other factor in all this was World War I. President Wilson said the U.S. was fighting for democracy abroad. So the suffragists asked, why don't we have democracy here at home?
There were some Russian ministers during the period of the Kerensky government who come, and the women have put up a sign saying, "Help us," to the Russians, "Help us, free us. We are not free citizens of the United States. We cannot vote."
President Wilson finally cracked. He went to the Senate and he asked them to support the women's suffrage amendment. He made the case on patriotic grounds. He said women had been working alongside men during the war, and for that reason, they deserved the vote.
A majority of states agreed. The U.S. adopted the 19th Amendment in 1920. It says, no state can prohibit women from voting. A few months later, there was a presidential election. More than 8 million women voted for the very first time. Almost immediately, U.S. policies began to change.
The vote is at the very heart of democratic citizenship. And so, though it is not the only way that people participate in self-rule in the U.S., it is one of the central and most important ways to participate in self-rule. And so, as women gained the vote in the states, they were changing the very meaning of what it was to be a woman. They're changing the meaning of womanhood. They're changing the meaning of democratic citizenship for women. That is no small thing.
Now, it's important to note that the 19th Amendment didn't enfranchise all women. There were some women, such as women in Puerto Rico and Native American women on reservations and many African American women, who weren't really fully enfranchised until the 1960s. But the 19th Amendment of 1920 really did transform U.S. elections. Politicians now had to be accountable to women as well. Today, female voters make up more than half the American electorate. I'm Kelly Jean Kelly, and that was our flashback to the fight for women's suffrage.